you're mid-conversation. Someone says something slightly off, and before you've even decided to, your voice changes. Pitch up, pace slower, warmer somehow on command. You didn't choose that. Nobody handed you a script. Some part of your brain just quietly took the wheel. Talking feels like the most natural thing a person does. It is also one of the strangest, most rigged systems your brain runs constantly without ever asking permission. Today, the actual psychology behind talking, what your voice gives away, why some conversations exhaust you and others don't, and why you've been lying to yourself about how good a listener you are. That last one is going to sting a little. Stick around anyway. Start with the voice itself because it's doing more work than you think. Your pitch rises slightly when you're nervous, almost involuntarily, regardless of what you're actually saying, which means a confident lie in a slightly higher voice is still, biologically, a nervous lie. Your throat did not get the memo about staying calm. Speaking pace shifts too. People speed up when excited or anxious and slow down when choosing words carefully, often to seem more credible, which is why every confident liar in every movie talks slowly. Slow speech reads as truthful, even when it's being used specifically to sell you something untrue. Researchers call this vocal entrainment when it happens between two people. Your pitch and pace unconsciously start matching the person you're talking to. It's why you start sounding slightly different around different friends. You're not being fake. Your voice is just doing its job a little too well. Here's something almost everyone has felt and never quite had a name for. Some conversations leave you energized. Others, of identical length, leave you completely wiped out. The difference usually isn't the topic. It's the cognitive load underneath it. Small talk is exhausting specifically because it requires constant social monitoring with almost no actual information exchanged. You're working hard for nothing, repeatedly on purpose, at parties. Deep conversation, despite covering more ground, often drains people less because it requires less constant self-monitoring and more genuine engagement, which means the dinner party you dreaded was never actually using your social battery. It was using your impression management battery, which is a completely different, much smaller battery. This is also why introverts and extroverts don't simply differ in how much they talk. They differ in which kind of conversation actually recharges them. Now for the part that stings. Most people rate themselves as good listeners. Most people are, measurably, not. Studies on listening behavior consistently find a gap between how attentive people believe they are and how much they actually retain from a conversation minutes later. While someone is talking, a significant chunk of most people's brain is quietly drafting a response instead of actually listening. You're writing your reply while they're still mid-sentence. Psychologists call genuine listening active listening, and it specifically requires suppressing that drafting impulse, which is mentally effortful enough that most people skip it without realizing. This is why you can have a full conversation with someone and walk away with almost no memory of what they actually said, only a memory of how clever your own responses felt. The fix researchers recommend is almost embarrassingly simple. Deliberately pause half a second before responding, which forces the drafting process to start after listening, not during it. Half a second. That's the whole fix. You've spent your entire life skipping a half-second pause, and it's been quietly costing you most of every conversation you've ever had. There's a reason silence in conversation feels so loud. Studies on conversational pauses have found that even a gap of around 4 seconds starts to feel uncomfortable to most people, far shorter than most people would guess. 4 seconds. That's it. 4 seconds of silence, and your brain starts sending out search parties to fill it with literally anything. This discomfort appears to be a strongly cultural, not universal. Some cultures treat silence as a normal, comfortable part of conversation rather than a gap that needs fixing, which means your specific discomfort with silence isn't hardwired. It's a regional setting. And somewhere on Earth, two people are sitting together right now in complete comfortable quiet, judging nobody. Comfortable silence, when it does happen, is actually considered a strong marker of relationship closeness, the absence of small talk's constant monitoring requirement. Here's a strange one. The specific words you use reveal things about your mental state that you have no idea you are broadcasting. Linguistic researchers have found that function words, small connector words like I, we, and but, predict things like emotional state and even social rank more reliably than the actual content words people focus on. Nobody is consciously editing their pronoun usage in conversation, which is exactly why it's such a reliable signal. You genuinely cannot fake it on purpose. People experiencing depression, for example, have been found to use the word I noticeably more often, a subtle, unconscious shift toward internal focus. Your group chat has been quietly leaking psychological data about everyone in it for years, and nobody installed a single piece of tracking software to do it. Now, interrupting. Almost everyone does it. Almost everyone hates when it happens to them, and the reason behind it is more interesting than simple rudeness. Most interruptions aren't actually attempts to dominate the conversation. They're enthusiasm overflow, your brain finishing a thought before it evaporates. This is genuinely good news for everyone who has been quietly hating themselves for interrupting their friends. You weren't being a bad listener, you were just losing a race against your own memory. There is a less charitable version, though. Research also links frequent interruption to perceived status, where higher status speakers interrupt more and face fewer social consequences for it, which means the loudest person in your group chat isn't necessarily the most enthusiastic. They might just be the one nobody's pushed back on yet. Here's the single most reliable trick for being remembered as a great conversationalist, and it has almost nothing to do with what you say. Studies on conversation quality have repeatedly found that people who ask more follow-up questions are rated as significantly more likable, regardless of how interesting their own stories were. You don't need better stories. You need to ask one more question than feels natural. That's the entire secret, and somehow almost nobody actually uses it. Follow-up questions specifically signal genuine interest, which research shows people are far more sensitive to detecting and rewarding than most realize. Meanwhile, most people spend conversations waiting for their turn to talk about themselves, which is, statistically, the least effective strategy for being liked that humans have ever consistently chosen anyway. Here's the actual thread running through everything in this video. Almost none of what makes a conversation good or bad is happening at the level you're paying attention to. It's happening underneath, in pace, in pauses, in pronouns, in the half second you didn't take. You've been treating talking like it's the easy part of being a person. It might genuinely be the hardest one, and it's running constantly in the background every single day without ever submitting a status report. So next conversation, try the half second pause. Ask one more question that feels natural, and if it goes quiet for 4 seconds, let it. Nobody's actually keeping score except you. Subscribe for more videos like this.